Part 1. The Hidden, Unequal Love. The morning air was crisp, though not in the way you might expect for a December day. It wasn't the kind of cold that made you want to bundle up or seek warmth. It was a different kind of chill. The kind that settled in the pit of your stomach and made your skin crawl. Though you couldn't pinpoint exactly why, Christmas morning had always been the same in my family. Predictable and neatly packaged, just like the tree in the corner. The same tired ornaments we had been using for decades. Their colors faded from years of careless handling. The fireplace crackled dutifully, and the scent of cinnamon rolls drifted in from the kitchen, as it always did. It all felt so ordinary, so rehearsed, but something was different this year. There was a tension in the room that none of us had spoken about aloud, but it hung there, thick, oppressive, a feeling that I would soon be reminded once again of my place in this family. A place that was never quite as important as Jenna's. I glanced over at her, sitting on the other side of the room, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the edge of her mug. Her bright smile was as expected. Charming, radiant, like she was the star of some Hallmark movie. I wanted to scream, not at her, but at this whole damn charade. For years, I had been sidelined. It was as if I was only present in the background, filling space while my parents adored my sister. Then, my mom entered the room, dressed in her signature red velvet robe. She looked like a queen presiding over her kingdom. Her smile was wide and proud, as if she had just won a lottery she hadn't even played. She approached Jenna with a small gold-wrapped box, handing it to her with a flourish. "Here," she said, practically glowing. "A little something for you." Jenna's reaction was a performance I had seen 1,000 times before. Exaggerated, over the top, like she had just been handed a diamond-encrusted crown. She tore off the wrapping paper with flair, her eyes already wide in mock surprise, her lips already forming that rehearsed gasp. "Oh my God, Mom, this is amazing," she squealed, her arms going around my parents as she hugged them both tightly, her voice high-pitched with excitement. I could feel my stomach turning in knots. This was the moment when I would be forgotten, the moment when their attention would solely focus on Jenna. I watched, numb, as she opened the box to reveal a key, a simple silver key nestled in a velvet-lined box. Jenna's eyes sparkled, and she gasped. "A key! What's this for?" she asked, her voice filled with feigned innocence. Though she already knew. "We bought you a house," my mom declared, her voice quivering with pride, as if she had just announced that Jenna had discovered the cure for cancer. She looked at me as she said it, waiting for me to react, for me to feel the joy that I was expected to share. But I didn't. Instead, I simply swallowed, the bitterness rising in my throat. I had learned long ago that in this family, silence was safer than honesty. My dad, sitting beside my mom, nodded solemnly, as though this was a sacred family tradition. The ritual was clear. Jenna had received the crown, the prize, while I was given nothing. Not even the courtesy of a moment of attention. I hadn't even opened my own gift yet, but I could already feel the weight of their indifference pressing down on me. It was just an envelope, plain and simple. No ribbon or bow to make it seem important. My dad had handed it to me right after Jenna's big moment, almost like an afterthought. There was no pause, no ceremony, just a quick and dismissive, "Here you go." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope, but I didn't look at the contents immediately. Instead, I stared at the plain sheet of paper inside, the weight of it pressed on me. What did they think of me? What did they believe I had become? I had always been the dependable one, the one who didn't make waves. But there was a cost to that. I had spent my life shrinking in the background, doing everything right, and yet I was never seen. I had always hoped it was just a phase, that one day someone would finally see me. But as I held the paper in my hand, I realized that that was never going to happen. Before I even read what was written, my mind drifted back to the countless moments I had experienced growing up. The birthdays, when Jenna was showered with designer handbags while I received whatever was on sale. The dinners, when my thoughts and opinions were met with silence. While Jenna's every word was treated like a gospel, I remembered my graduation from middle school, the time I earned a full scholarship. And yet, no one showed up to the ceremony because Jenna had a dance recital that night. All of those moments crashed into my mind in an instant. It wasn't in my head. This wasn't a phase. This was how things were always going to be. My dad glanced over at me, and for the first time all morning, his voice held a trace of curiosity. "Aren't you going to open it?" he asked casually, like nothing had changed. Like this was all normal. I slowly, deliberately unfolded the paper, each movement feeling heavier than the last. As I did, I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for some reaction. But what would I say? What could I possibly say that would change anything? Instead, I read the paper. The words were simple, but they sent a chill through my bones. It wasn't just a card. It wasn't even a gift. It was a reminder of exactly where I stood. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "Dinner, monsieur." But the words felt like acid in my throat, burning with every letter. I wanted to scream, to throw the paper across the room, but I didn't. I smiled instead. It was the only thing I knew how to do. This wasn't the moment to speak. Not yet. But it would come. Part 2. The revelation. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom, the one I had tried to forget, the one I had spent countless hours in, hoping that someday it would feel like home again. But it didn't. It never had. It was just a room, a place to sleep, a place to hide when the world outside felt too heavy. I sat by the window, watching the snow fall softly outside. The quiet was deafening, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of the loneliness that had been my constant companion. I had always told myself that the family dynamics would change, that one day they would see me, but they didn't. They never had. I had become the background character in their perfect little family play. The one who didn't need anything. The one who could take care of herself. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a secret that had been hidden for years that I finally realized just how far they had gone to keep me in the dark. I wasn't looking for anything in particular when I found the safe. I had come downstairs late that night, restless, searching for something to occupy my mind. I had just helped my dad with some boxes, listened to my mom complain about the renovations they were planning for the lake house, and quietly nodded through the conversations that didn't involve me. I had learned long ago that this was the way things were, but the safe was different. It was slightly ajar, the handle hanging loosely. I knew that my father never left it unlocked. He was too meticulous, too careful. His obsession with control extended to every part of the house, and the safe was no exception. It was a sacred relic to him. But there it was, cracked open, just enough for me to see inside. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to go snooping, but something inside me urged me to look. What did I have to lose? I pulled the door open further and peered inside. There were files. Lots of them. Property deeds, tax forms, bank statements. Some of them were familiar. But then there was something that caught my eye. A small envelope tucked beneath a stack of papers. It wasn't marked, but I could tell by the handwriting on the front that it was from my dad. To be opened upon death. The note read, "My heart skipped a beat. I knew I shouldn't open it, but I did." Inside, I found something that changed everything. It wasn't just a will. It was a new will, a will that listed my name first, not Jenna's. And it wasn't just a simple inclusion as a beneficiary. No, this was different. This was real. The house, the lake house. Everything was listed under my name. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I had just uncovered a secret that was never meant to be exposed. The more I looked at the purse, the more my pulse raced. Why had my father hidden this from me? Why had they never told me about it? What was the real reason behind it all? That night, I stayed up late, rifling through the papers in the safe. There were documents I didn't understand, transactions that didn't match up, and something else, a document with my forged signature. My hands shook as I scanned the paper, trying to process what I was seeing. My identity had been used without my consent. They had been moving money around, and I hadn't known a thing. I didn't confront them that weekend. I didn't say a word. But as I left the house, something inside me clicked. I had to do something, not just for me, but for everything I had silently endured. And I knew, deep down, that my revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be quiet, precise, and devastating. It would be a reckoning, and it was coming. Part 3. The Quiet Rebellion. The days after I discovered the truth felt like an eternity. I couldn't shake the image of that envelope, the one with my name on it, buried deep inside the safe. For years, I had felt like an outsider in my own family. But now I knew that I wasn't just ignored. I was manipulated, hidden behind the layers of deception. The real horror wasn't just that they had kept secrets from me, but that they had believed I wouldn't figure it out, that I would stay in the background, just like they wanted me to. But that had changed. I wasn't going to remain silent anymore. I wasn't going to play along with their game. I started making moves, small ones at first, but ones that would shift the balance of power. I reached out to a lawyer, someone I trusted, someone who wouldn't bat an eye at my questions. We went over the documents in the safe, the ones that had my name on them, the ones that had been hidden for years. The lawyer helped me make sense of it all. The ownership titles, the forged signatures, the property deeds, and the transactions that seemed to have no explanation. What I uncovered was staggering. It wasn't just the lake house that had been mortgaged in secret. It was several properties, hidden investments, accounts that should have been mine all along. But it was the lake house that was the key. The very house they loved to boast about, the one they called their legacy. It had been mortgaged to fund Jenna's failed startup, a startup that never even came close to taking off. My father must have thought he could fix the mess before anyone noticed. But he was wrong. The bank had already scheduled a discreet auction for the property, and by the time anyone caught wind of it, it was too late. I had already secured the deed to the house, legally, quietly, through a third-party agent. No name attached to the transaction. It felt like the universe had been waiting for this moment. Every injustice, every year of being sidelined, all led to this quiet, almost surgical act of taking control. They had underestimated me for so long, but now I had their crown, the one they had fought so hard to keep for themselves. The lake house, the symbol of their pride, was now mine, and it would stay that way. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. Instead, I waited. I planned. I bided my time. I could feel the tension building inside me, a slow burn that had started the moment I found out what had been done to me. The legal documents had been prepared. The deeds were officially mine. But there was one final step, one last reveal. This wasn't just about the house. It was about showing them that I wasn't their invisible daughter anymore. It was about proving that their manipulation, their disregard, their quiet favoritism had finally come back to haunt them. It was almost time. Christmas was approaching, and I had prepared a gift. Not a gift wrapped in glitter or fancy paper, but one that would shatter their perfect little holiday. It would be a simple envelope, plain, unassuming, but it would carry a truth so heavy that it would destroy everything they had built. I practiced the words in my mind, over and over. I knew what I had to do. The silence would speak louder than any argument ever could. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to shout. I had already won. The only thing left to do was reveal it. And when I did, it would leave them speechless. Part 4, the Christmas revelation. Christmas morning arrived just as it always did. The familiar scent of cinnamon rolls filled the air. The twinkling lights on the tree cast a warm glow across the room, and the fireplace crackled with its usual comforting sound. On the surface, everything was perfect, like a scene straight out of a movie. But beneath the surface, things were far from perfect. The tension in the air was palpable. My family, blissfully unaware of what was coming, was still caught up in their annual traditions. My sister was already unwrapping her gifts with the enthusiasm of a child who had never known a day of disappointment. My parents watched her, their faces glowing with pride, as if they were watching a star being born before their very eyes. I sat quietly, my gift still sitting on my lap. Its plain white box, a stark contrast to the extravagance of Jenna's pile of designer bags and carefully chosen trinkets. I watched as my sister squealed with excitement over her newest purchase, her eyes sparkling as she gushed over each item like she had just been handed the world's most precious treasures. Meanwhile, I felt nothing but an overwhelming sense of detachment. This wasn't my family. It hadn't been for years, but today it would be different. I glanced over at my parents. They hadn't noticed me. Of course, they hadn't. Why would they? They were too busy fawning over Jenna, as they always did. It was their ritual, their holiday performance. But today, I had no intention of playing along. I didn't need to. I had prepared my move, and it would be executed with precision. My father, ever the creature of habit, turned to me, finally noticing the quiet emptiness I carried with me. "Aren't you going to open it?" he asked, his voice casual, almost dismissive. I smiled at him, a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes, a smile that had become my armor. Without a word, I opened the plain white box and handed him the envelope inside. It was sealed with wax, simple but deliberate. No ribbon, no bow, just a statement, a truth they couldn't ignore. He took the envelope from my hands, still playing it cool, as though this was just another gift. "What's this?" he asked, his voice still light, though I could see the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. He cracked the seal and began to read. I watched him closely, the air between us thick with anticipation. His eyes darted across the page, first with confusion, then with dawning realization. His face drained of color, and I could see the moment the weight of the situation hit him. The smug smile he had been wearing for hours cracked, and for the first time all day, there was silence. True, heavy silence. My mother, who had been gleaming with pride just moments earlier, leaned forward. Her curiosity piqued. She read over his shoulder, her face slowly contorting from confusion to panic. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling, a crack forming in the facade of the perfect holiday they had spent years building. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I just sat there, still as a statue, watching the weight of my actions slowly sink in. The documents they were holding were the key. The deed to the lake house was now in my name, fully paid for, and no longer available for their use. I had taken their prize, their legacy, and made it mine. Jenna, bless her heart, looked around the room in confusion. She had no idea what was happening. This wasn't part of the script. She had never been taught that there were consequences to her actions, that the world didn't revolve around her. She held her new designer purse tightly, as though it could protect her from the truth that was unfolding before her. But nothing could protect her from this. The silence stretched on. My father finally spoke, but his voice was no longer casual. How did you... he stammered, looking between my mother and me. But his words trailed off. There was no explanation. There was nothing left to say. I stood up slowly, smoothing the hem of my sweater, as calm and composed as I had ever been. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to say anything more. "Thank you for breakfast," I said, my voice light but firm, as though nothing out of the ordinary had just happened. With that, I turned and walked toward the door. There was no need to look back. The truth had been delivered, and now it was time for me to leave. They could drown in their disbelief and confusion. It didn't matter to me anymore. I had done what I needed to do, and in that moment, I realized something profound. I didn't need their approval. I had taken back control of my life, and nothing would ever be the same again. I stepped outside, pulling the door shut quietly behind me. The cold air hit me like a cleansing wind, sharp and refreshing. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of silence and resentment begin to lift. For the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not joy, not victory, but peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've finally taken back what was always yours. And as I walked to my car, I didn't look back. Because, for the first time in years, I wasn't looking for forgiveness. I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I was finally free. Part 5. The quiet victory. The drive back to the lake house felt surreal. The air around me seemed to clear with every mile, the weight that had been pressing on me for years slowly lifting. I had prepared for this moment, strategized every detail, and now that it was over, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and numbness. The cold, clean air outside the family home had a certain sharpness to it, like a cleansing wind that would blow away the years of built-up anger, resentment, and invisible scars. When I arrived at the lake house, I didn't know what to expect. Part of me thought my parents might call, beg for an explanation, try to guilt me into coming back. But they didn't. The phone stayed silent. I didn't care. I wasn't looking for reconciliation or to mend what had been broken for so long. What I needed wasn't an apology, nor a dramatic confrontation. I had already done that in the most complete way possible. I settled into the house, a space that had once been just a backdrop to my family's charade. But now it was mine, completely, irrevocably. It wasn't the house itself that had power over me anymore. It was what it represented: autonomy, freedom, a life no longer dictated by the expectations and favoritism of others. The lake stretched out before me, frozen now in the thick of winter, its surface a vast expanse of stillness. Snowflakes drifted down softly, falling without urgency, without any force. Everything felt calm, and for the first time, it was a calm I had earned. As I sat in an old armchair by the window, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and dust, I could almost hear the faint echo of my own thoughts. It was quiet here, in the way that only winter knew how to be, hushed, serene, untouched. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring its warmth as it filled the hollow spaces inside me. The peace wasn't what I expected. It wasn't joyous or triumphant. It was a quiet peace, one born of long years of struggle, of being overlooked and underestimated. I had taken my life back in a way that no one would ever expect. I didn't need anyone to know the full story. I didn't need validation. I just needed to know that I had the power now. I thought about my family, about the way they would react when they truly realized the full extent of what had happened. Maybe they would try to contact me, apologize, or offer excuses. Maybe they would ignore it entirely, pretending like nothing had changed. Either way, it didn't matter. I had already made my point. My victory didn't lie in their response, but in the fact that I had finally stopped playing by their rules. I had stopped shrinking into the background, waiting for approval that would never come. As I sat there, my thoughts drifting like the snow outside, I began to wonder if they would ever reach out. Would they try to explain themselves? Would they attempt to fix what they thought was broken? Or would they continue to play the same roles, pretending that nothing had changed? It didn't matter. What mattered was that, for the first time, I had acted on my own terms. No one could take that away from me. I wasn't sure how long I would stay here, in this quiet solitude. But for now, it was enough. It was more than enough. For the first time in my life, I wasn't playing a supporting role in my own story. I was the one writing the script. Days passed, and I slipped into the rhythms of life in the lake house. It was a slow kind of living. Unhurried, quiet. There were no phone calls from my parents. No messages from Jenna about her latest accomplishments. It was as if they had all gone on with their lives, pretending that nothing had happened. But I knew the truth. The lake house was mine, a symbol of everything I had taken back. But then, in the silence of my new life, something unexpected happened. It was a Saturday afternoon when I saw the message from Jenna. It was brief, filled with excitement and anxiety. As always, she was asking if I would join them for a family gathering. Her text as carefully worded as a rehearsed performance. For a moment, I considered it. I thought about how things might play out, how they would beg me to come back, how they would try to twist the narrative to make it seem like I was the one who had wronged them. But the truth was, I didn't need to be part of their drama anymore. I had made my decision. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I just sat there, watching the snow fall outside, feeling that strange sense of closure settle over me. They could keep their perfect family. They could continue with their game. But it was no longer my game for the first time. I had drawn a line, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. The line was quiet, sharp, and final, and I wasn't stepping over it again. In that moment, I understood something profound. It wasn't the house that had given me power. It wasn't the documents or the legal maneuvering. It was the decision to stop playing the victim, to stop letting them define who I was. It was the decision to stand tall, to take what was mine, and to never look back. I thought about the years of silence. The years of pretending to be someone I wasn't, just to keep the peace. I thought about the quiet rage that had built up inside me for so long. And I realized something else. That rage, that frustration, had been my fuel. It had carried me to this point. And now, as I sat in that old armchair by the window, I felt the weight of it all shift. It was no longer rage that drove me. It was something far more powerful. Peace. A peace that had been earned, not given. A peace that had come not from anyone else, but from within me. I wasn't just taking control of my life. I was choosing to live it on my own terms. And that was the most liberating feeling of all. The silence in the lake house wasn't the silence of defeat. It wasn't the silence of waiting for someone to come and fix things. It was the silence of someone who had taken back everything they had been denied. The silence of victory. And in that silence, I knew one thing for sure. I would never again be invisible.